Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, but some Christmases are better than others. And one Christmas in particular was huge for me. And it was the time we found the SNES underneath the Christmas tree. It's wild that I was such a huge video game fan, but we never really had video games in my house except for an old Atari 2600 that my grandpa bought. And kudos to him. God bless him for that. He tried. But the console, something was wrong with the console. I don't remember what it was, but I know many of the games didn't work. But one of the games that did work was Asteroids. And I remember playing Asteroids for hours on end. Still bored out my mind, but still appreciative. Kudos to you, Grandpa. But most of my gaming experience was third party in nature. Like I remember, playing video games at my cousin's house. I remember one of my earliest memories, and one of my coolest memories was I had a cousin that lived out on Long Island, and he had a Sega Master System, and we'd play Shinobi for hours on end. Right? Shinobi, Kid Icarus. We played those types of games. I had a cousin named Tiffany out in Brooklyn, and she had a Sega Genesis, and we'd play X-Men, Altered Beast, Dungeons and Dragons, Golden Axe. Wow, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic 2, Sonic and Knuckles. We hours and hours sunk into the Sega Genesis. Another third-party experience was my friend Richie from next door. He was my next door neighbor when I lived in Brooklyn, and he had a Super Nintendo. And my first time seeing Street Fighter 2 on a console was at his house. I remember he knocked on my door. It seemed like it was late at night, but it was probably 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And this kid knocks on my door and he's like, "Hey, I got something cool to show you." So I go to his place, and lo and behold, it's the Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo. And I remember my mind being blown at how we were able to play such a cool game on a small console, right? But yeah, I remember playing Super Castlevania at Richie's house, Contra 3, the Alien Wars at Richie's house. What else? NBA Showdown, NBA Hang Time, NBA Jam, NBA Live. We loved those games back on the SNES. What else? Zelda: A Link to the Past is probably my favorite game of all time. Simply because of the nostalgia and the sort of the memories it brings to my heart, and it has a deep meaning for me because of what my family was going through at that time. And just like most kids, we all ran to the tree. We started tearing our gifts apart. My sisters would open up Barbies and nail stuff and hair stuff, and that was pretty cool for them. But I was getting G.I. Joes, I was getting Ninja Turtles, I was getting Wrestling Bros. So I was in the thick of it, and I was happy as heck. But I remember when all the gifts were unwrapped and we were ready to settle down and have breakfast, my stepdad and my mom said they had one more gift for us. And we were super excited about that, right? So we were wondering, oh, what was it? What is it? What is it? And they went to the closet, came back with this huge box and laid it in front of us. And we were dumbfounded. We were flabbergasted, right? So we start to open it. Lo and behold, it was the Super Nintendo. So once we got the SNES, my gaming world was wide open, right? So I remember we started with the Super Mario World, and me and my sisters would play that all day long. And then my stepdad bought us Earthworm Jim, and that was another amazing game. And then we moved on to Super Street Fighter. Then we moved on to Mortal Kombat, which was very controversial for its time. There was a lot of controversy between the Super Nintendo version and the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat, because the Genesis version allowed blood, whereas the Super Nintendo version was still, Nintendo back then was still like kid friendly, kid oriented. But yeah, super controversial time, but still played well on the Super NES. What else we played? We played a bunch of A Legend of Zelda, like I mentioned, Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 3, which is actually Final Fantasy 6 in the States. It's Final Fantasy 3 in America, Final Fantasy 6 in Japan. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I remember playing Super Punch Out, playing all kinds of SNES hits, right? And like I said, my family did everything they could to give me what I needed. I didn't always have what I wanted. So I was basically a generation behind, right? So when everybody was playing PlayStation, I was still playing my Super Nintendo, and I had a crazy Super Nintendo library. I mean, I was buying games. I remember back in Brooklyn, they had pawn shops that would sell video games. I'm pretty sure they still have those, but I remember buying games for $15. I would buy older games. Like at that time, I remember I found Chrono Trigger at a pawn shop for $15. I was ecstatic, not even knowing what it was. I just heard about it in GamePro, and I was like, I gotta check this out. And I found it at a pawn shop, Chrono Trigger. Uh, and in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, there was actually a vendor that worked on Stockholm and Knickerbocker Avenue. If you're from the area, you know who this man is. I forgot his name, but he would sell used video games on a corner of a street. God bless that guy. He was a godsend. But yeah, man, my whole gaming world, my gaming palette switched up immediately once we got the Super Nintendo, and I've rocked with that console. That same Super Nintendo I got in 1992, I rocked with it until maybe 1999. Getting the Super Nintendo that morning was huge for me because it really changed the trajectory of my gaming. It no longer was hopefully being able to play at a friend's house or begging my parents for quarters to play at the arcade. Now I had the real thing in my house, and I took advantage of it. So before going to school, I'd play Mario for hours on end, or it would be Final Fight. Final Fight was a big game in my childhood, and it was great being able to experience that with my siblings also. Seeing the joy in their faces when they noticed what it was. And that's a memory that I'm gonna keep with me forever, because I see the same thing with my kids. On Christmas morning, my oldest daughter's a huge gamer. My youngest daughter, not so much, but my oldest daughter's a huge gamer. And I remember buying her the Nintendo 3DS XL and how she felt about that, and getting the Wii and the Wii U and all that stuff. And just seeing the pure joy in her face was, it just melts me as a parent, and there's nothing better than being a girl dad, in my opinion. And that was a great time in my life. I've experienced many great gaming moments, but that's probably the most important gaming moment in my life. And that was getting the SNES on Christmas Day in 1992.